Hi there and welcome back to episode 2 of my walk from Taree to Newcastle. Thank you for joining me again. I'm going to keep this intro pretty short this time because I feel like the outro might be a little bit longer. This episode 2, covers just one day from my hike. And it was probably the hardest day from the whole hike. And we'll talk a little bit more why that was after you watch the video, and obviously by the time you have seen the videos, you'll have a sense of why. But again, it was an experience where I maybe didn't elaborate as much as I could have as to what that day really did entail. So I'm going to let the video play, but as I said, it's just the one day. It covers the 𝗧𝗿𝗲𝗏 and 𝗂𝘆𝗀 area, so essentially I was walking into seal rocks. But yeah, I'm going to let them play and then we'll talk a little bit more after. So I'm currently walking along a road that goes to the beach, and that beach is called Sandbar Beach, and it's called Sandbar Beach because, believe it or not, there's a sandbar. Now this sandbar stretches between the ocean and a little inland lake, and what's important about this sandbar is it connects two pieces of land. The first is the piece I'm walking on now, and the second is the piece that I need to continue walking along that leads to my campsite. Now, the fun thing about a sandbar that's stretching between the ocean and a lake is that it may not be there if the water level's high, or the tide's high, I suppose. Then that sandbar can be submerged and suddenly you can't walk across that stretch. So that's a risk for me today, because if that's the case and I can't cross that bit of water, or not that bit of water, I can't cross that bit of land, then I'm kind of screwed. I'm gonna have to backtrack 3 or 4 Ks to where I started down this road, and then go a long way around, which will add at least another 10, maybe more Ks onto the day as well. And completely circumvent the campsite that I'm wishing to stay at tonight. So that could be really problematic. So somewhere up here, I'm going to turn a corner and learn my fate. And I really hope it's a good one. I think it must just be up here, since those people just parked and started walking down. Wish me luck. So I'm approaching the point where I can see across a stretch now and see whether there's sand, and I don't know whether you're going to be able to see it in this video, especially not with the way that I'm stepping about on this sand, but I'm very happy to say, at least from here, it looks like sand stretches all the way across, which means I'm going to be able to get across to the track that'll take me to my campsite. This is very good news. If this was not the case, it would have turned into a very bad day. There is one small bit I can't see, whether the sand crosses, but I'm going to be optimistic. Okay. Oh, how I love walking on soft sand. Okay. There's a sandbar. In fact, there's a whole bunch of sand. It's a huge area. But it did occur to me, as I was celebrating the fact that there was so much sand and I had nothing to worry about, that all the sand is wet, which means it must be tidal or something, and it must fill up. So I'm just going to consider myself lucky either way, and not complain about it, because now I can get across to these trees up ahead, which is where I'll find the next bit of my path to get me to my campsite. And the campsite has showers, and I'm excited. So this was good. This could have been very, very bad, but let's not think about that. Let's just celebrate that I can walk and not swim this. So I just had to cross this water. I spoke a little bit too soon about there being no water at the sandbar to cross. Luckily I was able to get across with the water going basically up to my crutch, but it didn't quite reach my bag, so that's good. There's a couple of bits where you just sank like a foot into the sand, which is why it went up to my crutch and not just my knees. I did record the crossing, but I recorded it for Instagram, so it's kind of profile video, which doesn't quite fit this format. So feel free to go to my Instagram story to see it, but I didn't fall over, so it's not really worth it. And that's kind of the main reason I recorded it, is in case I fell over. So you didn't miss anything. It was nice to cross it, felt very refreshing, but now I've just got to sit and dry for a little bit. So literally just in the time that I've been sitting here, letting myself dry off a little bit after crossing that water, it's just been wave after wave of water rushing in. There's another one coming now, which you'll see in a second. And this whole area has just filled up with water to the point where I really don't think I could have crossed it now. So that's just super lucky that I got here when I did. You can see this here, look. It's all just rushing in. And there's now a huge body of water in front of me. So, yeah, very lucky timing. So, I'm walking on a small track towards the main track just after the sandbar. Basically, the track that I thought led to the main track from the beach, the sandbar beach, it didn't exist. So it was there was evidence of a track starting off the beach from Google Maps, and then the main track was nearby, so I assumed one led to the other. I assumed incorrectly. It did not. It was just obviously a spot that people like to go in and camp or have a bonfire or whatever. So there was no way to connect to the main path. So that was a worry. I looked on Google Maps again, and by the way, not suggesting at all that Google Maps is the premier hiking tool, but I use satellite view for a bunch of reasons. But in this case, I was looking for evidence of any other tracks leading off the beach. And right down the end of the beach, I could see some small evidence of maybe another trail. I wasn't confident, and it was also further away from the main trail, but at that point I had nothing to lose, because if it wasn't there, I was in trouble. I would have had to have, I don't know, and I'm not going to bother wasting my brain power thinking about it, but it would not have been good. As you can tell, luckily for me, after a very steep climb and a very small trail to begin with, I'm now on a track that should lead me to the main hiking track, which, well, it's very, very lucky. So yeah, I should follow this for a bit longer, and then I'll be on the main track. And once I'm on the main track, then I should be home. I still have a bit to walk, but it means that I'm on a main track all the way to the camp, which is reassuring. So yeah, very, very lucky. So once again, I might have celebrated prematurely. That's the track I've been coming up. I realised I veered off the main track onto an unmarked track. That's that way around the corner. The track stayed about 2 meters wide and clear, but it's apparently not the right one, and it's on nothing. This, however, is the track I'm supposed to continue on, that barely looks like a track. But it's the one that's on all three of my devices, including my Garmin. This one's on none. I want to stay on this one, but since it's on none, it could be going down to one of the further beaches and not to Seal Rocks, which is where I need to get to. It could just end at some point, and then it's all for nothing. But equally, this one might also end, since it's barely a beginning. So, on nothing, on all three of my GPS devices, but neither are on New South Wales Parks website, which is not reassuring. What to do? All I can do is try and follow my map for now, and just hope that this track remains walkable. I'm not going to say safe because, well, look at it, but walkable. And it's not short either, which sucks, but gotta give it a go, I guess. All right. So there was definitely a track here once, but it's certainly not in use now. It's very overgrown and lots of leaf litter and everything like that. But I'm watching my GPS closely and I am following the right path. I just have to hope that it stays open enough like this and it doesn't just get worse and worse and close up completely, because then I'm going to be stuck halfway. So again, roll the dice. It doesn't make me very comfortable walking and stuff like this and being so isolated, but again, you know, I'm as protected as I can be. I've just got to be really careful, but yeah, not ideal, not a path I would recommend. But yeah, for now, I just got to try and get through it. Well, I'm certainly not on the beaten path anymore, that's for sure. This is some pretty decent bush bashing right here. As you can see, remnants of a path still remain, which is good. I'm grateful. But there's some very tight squeezes. Lots of debris everywhere, obviously. And yeah, I have to be really careful. I can't quite fit under some of these things. On the plus side, I like to think that because I'm making so much noise, I'm not going to run into any nasties. That's what I'm going to think anyway. So I'm on now some kind of trail. It disappeared for a long time there, and I actually managed to veer off where the trail should be and got into some really thick vegetation that I could barely get through. And it was at that point I checked my GPS on my watch again and realised I had veered away from where the track should be. And at least that meant that I could go back to where the track should be, and as I did, that meant things opened up a little bit. And now, after a bit more walking, I'm on kind of a track. So I'm hoping it stays that way. I've still got a fair way to walk. But boy, this has been challenging. This is not what I was expecting from this afternoon. I thought I had a nice, good trail to walk back on, but this is bush bashing at its finest. So yeah, but at least for now, there is a track, which is good. So I'm nearly at the end. Lo and behold, there's some kind of blockade here in the middle of nowhere. Well, in the middle of what is essentially the path. That's not a path. This is the second time I've walked on a track that I've entered from one side only to find it's ridiculously hard, and then found that it's closed on the other side, and that explains why it's so hard. So yeah, I can't explain how tough this bit was. It was absolutely wild. Anyway, I'm nearly at the end, so I'm just going to push through this last bit so I can get off this little nightmare. So I'm literally sitting on the side of the road, having a break because I'm shattered. It's this nice sandy patch, and I thought that looks like a good seat. Hopefully nothing will bite my butt. Yeah, I'm not going to go into detail about the bit I just went through. I'll talk about that later, but that took a lot out of me and my feet are just really tired. So just a quick break, and then I'll get going again. Almost at Seal Rocks. I'm probably not going to do the scenic loop because I have no desire for scenes right now. The only scene I want to see is where I'm sleeping tonight. So apologies for that, but after that last little exercise, this has become a get to the home point objective now. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this beautiful, beautiful view. You're absolutely welcome. Okay, so I made it to camp. Long day. I think it was about 32 k's in the end, but the length wasn't the real issue. The challenge in the middle was, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, but for the moment I'm going to get some dinner on. I've got the little jet boil ready to go, and it's a reward dinner tonight for surviving. I have some jerky and mac and cheese, and it's a value pack too, which means there's going to be a lot of it. So I'm going to chop up a little bit of jerky and cook it with the mac and cheese. I don't know what gourmet dish you'd call this. Maybe, I don't know, mac and jerk. Actually, yeah, mac and jerk, because if you say it the other way around, this is probably not safe for kids. But some lollies for dessert as well. So I might get that going, and then once that's done, we will have another chat. So there we go, mac and jerk. I haven't tried it yet, but it looks good, so that counts for something, right? Yeah, so I was going to talk a little bit about what happened today, all of today, but honestly, I'm just so tired. I think I just need to eat and go to bed. I'm pretty sure I have another long day ahead of me tomorrow, so I think I might try and save that conversation for tomorrow, and maybe with slightly better, views for you to look at other than my dinner. But suffice to say, it was a very tough day. And yeah, really just took everything I had. So I'm going to eat this and then get some sleep and hopefully join you again tomorrow with more energy. All right, good night. Okay, so you've watched the videos now, and hopefully that's given you a sense of what I was referring to when I said that this was a hard day. So right from the outset of this day, there was an element of unpredictability. I was crossing an area that there was no path to cross, which was a sandbar. Because there were no trails, the only way I could really do any kind of, or have any kind of insight on this area was using Google Maps. So looking at Google Maps and going, is there a path that I'm going to be able to walk across here? Now, some of you might be saying, well, there's probably easier ways. You could have called this place or called that place and asked, and you are absolutely right. I could have rang and asked places, but maybe I'm afflicted by that same male curse of not wanting to ask for directions. I didn't want to ask anybody. I just wanted to give it a go. These are the reasons why I find myself in challenges, because I don't always do the wisest thing. Anyway, I could tell from Google Maps that there was enough sand, I hoped, at least from the image, whenever that image was taken, there was going to be enough sand for me to cross from one area to the next on this particular hike for the day. So that was a gamble. Now, if there was no way for me to cross this particular sandy area, then I would be in real trouble. It was going to be firstly a couple K backtrack, and then I was going to have to find a whole new path to get to my objective for the evening. So I was taking a pretty big gamble. But in saying that, I felt confident that it was going to be okay. So I set out. Obviously, day 3, the previous day, was a relatively short day. I'd finished up a bit early as well, so I felt pretty recharged for day 4. And I made my way to this sandbar area. As you would have seen in the videos, I was pretty happy when I came out to the sandbar area, and lo and behold, there was plenty of sand and I was able to get across. I did realize shortly after that my timing had been impeccable, and if I had come any later, I might have actually had a real challenge getting across that water, or that sandy, watery area. Nevertheless, I got across, and I felt pretty happy about that, because from that point on, I essentially had in my mind a marked trail all the way to Seal Rocks. That disappeared pretty quickly when I came into the first little trail that I thought would lead me to the main trail, and it did not, which again you would have heard in the videos. Ultimately, I did find another trail, and that got me out onto what I considered the main trail. But again, I reached this point where the main trail that I was on suddenly wasn't the main trail anymore. It had continued as a wide open trail the whole time I was walking on it, and then it actually remained an open trail into the distance. I could see it, and it was great. But according to my GPS, I was now off the trail, and where I was didn't exist as a trail at all. So again, I won't rehash all of this. You would have heard some of it in the video, but I had a choice to make whether I wanted to stay on the open trail or go on the trail that looked pretty nasty, but at least it was on the map, right? And I could follow the map. So that's what I did, and that trail went from, well, what was a pretty bad trail to begin with, it really wasn't a trail, to just, like day 1, but worse, really. It was just solid bush vegetation, to the point where I was just fighting my way through trees. and bushes, and I was getting caught in vines, and I was walking on the ground, and obviously, and there was holes everywhere that I was sinking into. And I'm not a nature expert. I seem to keep telling you how I'm not all these things. I'm not a nature expert, so I don't know what all these holes are. Obviously something's creating them, and my mind immediately goes to snakes. But I have seen some holes, some kind of, what do we call them? Like, I don't know, a large collection of holes that were created by rats. It's the home for rats, and I just kept telling myself that that's what these holes were, because if they weren't, maybe they were snake holes, and I'm just, stepping my way through them. So there was a couple of things I hated about that. I hated a bit the sense of danger that it created. I hated the fact that I wasn't walking on firm ground, and I hated that if this was something's home, I'm damaging it, right? That's not what I'm there to do. I want to walk on a trail ideally, and not, leave a footprint even, and certainly not one that's destroying some kind of habitat. So it was a really horrible start, that experience, and ultimately I did find where this track should have been, and when I stuck closely to that trail, I could just make my way through the vegetation. It was just clear enough that I could push through. But when I say push through, I mean push through. I really had to fight my way through bushes the whole way. There was very few moments where it opened up and there was some kind of clarity as to where I had to walk. And it was normally those moments that I stopped and recorded, because that feeling of anxiety that I mentioned earlier in my videos, that came from not knowing if I was going to reach point B, those moments of sort of track clarity helped me relax a little bit, and I'd stop and I'd create a video. The downside of that is you don't see just how bad some of those areas were. And if somebody's looking at this video going, I might try and do the same hike, I would absolutely tell you to avoid this particular stretch. From the sandbar through to Seal Rocks on this particular track, and you can see it from my map, you can see it from the GPX if you get your hands on that. It's not really a trail at all anymore. If you are an experienced bushwalker, and I would say if you've got someone with you, I wouldn't recommend doing it on your own, then maybe it would make for a good adventure, but you really want to be prepared. It's not a great place to walk. So as I'm fighting my way through all of these bushes and trees, and I got completely covered in head to toe, I had sticks in my hair and everything. At some point during that battle, my rain jacket and my warm jacket that were wrapped up and strapped to the back of my bag were ripped off my bag somehow. Obviously a tree grabbed them or whatever, and I lost both my jackets. So if anybody is exploring the area and you find 2 jackets, they would be mine. So again, that added more concern once I realized, which wasn't until later that day, because I no longer had a rain jacket and I no longer had a jacket for warmth. Lucky for me, the weather was very, very warm anyway, and I did have multiple layers that I could layer up with if I really needed to. And even further than that, I had an emergency blanket, so I wasn't really worried, but of course it was not great, right, to lose both my jackets. So that happened somewhere in that journey too. And I was fighting my way through this horrible path. I say horrible from a path perspective. It was a beautiful area, horrible path, for about 2 hours. And the hardest part of that was not the physical battle that I was fighting through those bushes. It was actually the psychological, that at any point through that 2-hour journey, I was going to hit a wall of vegetation so thick that I wouldn't be able to get through. And it's really tough to just keep fighting for 2 hours, wondering if at any particular moment you're going to be stuck and stopped in the middle of this wild bush and have to backtrack to an area that, as you would have seen in the videos, with that water coming in down on the sandbar, I wouldn't have been able to get back across. I would have been stranded where I was. So that was just spinning in my head the whole time, whether I'd get actually through to the other side and make it to where I had booked accommodation at a campsite that night. Obviously I did, you would have seen the video, and I was very, very happy to make it through, but it was by far the hardest hiking experience I've had to date, fighting my way through those bushes, and again, with this huge bag on my back. You have to remember that I'm not just me, making my way through and slipping through the bushes. I've got this big bag on my back that every branch is grabbing, and obviously weighs a ton as well, so that's weighing me down. So it was really, really tough. Anyway, ultimately got through, made it to my campsite just before they closed the gate, which was very, very lucky. But yeah, it was a really, really tough day. And for as much as I can explain to you the psychological elements of that particularly 2-hour battle, unless you've done something like it, it's really hard to get a grasp of. But in saying that, I really don't recommend that you go out and try it there unless you're experienced and you maybe have somebody with you, because it was the most nervous I had been in a wild setting. And again, like I've mentioned before, some great learning. The first thing I probably learned is that I need to plan my tracks better. But again, it's all part of it, and I'm happy to say that I got out the other side safe. But yeah, in hindsight, I could have planned that area a little bit better, and I would certainly recommend to anyone doing this particular track or trying to replicate bits of this track to maybe plan a different route for that one, or certainly make sure you're not going in alone and that you are well equipped from a safety perspective. So yeah, that was day 4 done. Very, very long, very, very tough, very hot day, but ultimately survived. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there. The next episode, episode 3, will kick off from here. Covers a few more days again. It's not just a single day, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, if you did, please give it a like, please subscribe, look at the rest of the videos. I do really, really appreciate it. And yeah, continue watching and enjoy. Thanks.